Hello, children. Today I'm going to take the third lesson in history. The name of the lesson is Ruling the Countryside. The word countryside means village. In this video, you're going to see the different kinds of land revenue system introduced by British officers in order to collect the land revenue or taxes in India. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, East India Company wanted only puppet rulers. Here, puppet rulers refers to those rulers who would listen to company's demands and allow them to continue trade without paying taxes. But after the Battle of Buxar fought between Mir Qasim and East India Company, East India Company believed that it is useless to trust in puppet rulers because anytime these puppet rulers may change their mind and ask the company to pay taxes. So, after the defeat in the Battle of Buxar in 1764, Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II was forced to give the Diwani of Bengal to the East India Company. This Diwani allowed East India Company to collect revenue or taxes from the land of Bengal. But with this new right, the company also had the responsibility to administer the land of Bengal. So, for it, the company had to establish or set up a new system through which it could collect revenue from Bengal. Now, it had three work to do. First, it had to organize the revenue system, that is, how it is going to collect taxes from the people of Bengal. Second task was to identify the crops and ask peasants or farmers to grow that crops which can bring more and more revenue to the British government. And third task was to colonize the countryside, that is, bringing all the villages under the rule of the British government. Earlier, company was dependent on Britain to purchase cotton and silk. We all know British East India Company came to India to have trade in cotton, silk and spices. So whenever British East India Company bought these raw materials or finished goods, it had to import gold from Britain to purchase these raw materials or finished goods. But now the Diwani of Bengal helped British East India Company to use the resources, that is, now it can collect taxes from the people of Bengal and use that money to buy cotton, silk and spices and send those things or raw materials to Britain where it had a huge market. So company started asking high taxes from the people of Bengal. It did not do anything for the welfare of the people, but it started demanding high, extremely huge taxes from the people of Bengal. This led to a lot of economical problem in Bengal because people started leaving their country due to the high taxes which were forcefully asked from them. So it was clear that the company had no intention of providing any kind of security or good administration to the people of Bengal. All its focus was on to earn huge amount of revenue. So within 5 years, the company was able to purchase maximum goods, fine quality of cotton and silk. The purchase of goods doubled within the 5 years, all because of the revenue which was collected from the land of Bengal. Due to this, the economy of Bengal had a severe problem. It faced a lot of problem in three manners. First, the artisans who were working, they were forced to sell their products at a very cheap rate. So they started leaving their villages. Second, the village farmers were unable to pay the huge taxes demanded by the Nawabs of East India Company, that is the East India Company officials who called themselves as the Nawabs of Bengal. And so the farmers also started leaving their territory in Bengal. Not only this, a severe famine attacked the land of Bengal in 1770. So there was no money, no resources, no food, and the plight of the people had become very pathetic. Due to this, one third of population of Bengal was wiped out because of famine. It had killed 10 million people. Now, the company realized that in order to get taxes from the people of Bengal, it has to do something for the development of agriculture, something for the welfare of the farmers. Because only when the farmers are there, the land can be cultivated and they can earn a huge revenue over the land. So the company now realized that if the economy of Bengal suffered, then they cannot earn revenue or income from Bengal. So they started focusing on agriculture. They believed that if agriculture is developed or improved, they will be able to get more revenue from the land of Bengal, more taxes from the people of Bengal. So in 1793, they brought out the first plan of improving agriculture. But before we understand what steps were taken out by the British East India Company for the improvement of agriculture, it is important to understand the hierarchy of the people who paid taxes or who were responsible in paying or collection of taxes. At the lower level were the farmers, also known as peasants or ryots. Above the farmers were the village headmen, the senior man of the village, who would collect taxes from the entire village farmers and who would pay to the zamindars or the talukdars. So the third person in the hierarchy was the talukdar or the zamindars. Above the zamindars or talukdars were the British East India Company officers who would collect the revenue from the entire area or territory. So, the first system of land revenue collection or improvement of land was brought out by Lord Cornwallis, who was the Governor General at that time. So, he had introduced the permanent system of land revenue collection. Lord Cornwallis was the Governor General of Bengal from the year 1786 to 1793. Under the permanent system of land revenue collection, the local rulers or talukdars were given the responsibility of collecting rent. These local rulers or talukdars were called the zamindars. So these zamindars were encouraged by the British officials to improve the agricultural practices, and as the rent to be collected from the land was fixed permanently, so if there is an improvement in the agricultural cultivation, then both the farmers and the zamindars will get benefit from it. Not only this, the British East India Company will also have a regular source of income. So this was the highlight, or this was the idea of Lord Cornwallis when he had introduced the permanent system of collection of land revenue. But this system failed very badly because the first thing was that the peasants or the farmers who were cultivating the land, they were not able to pay the huge revenue or huge rent asked by the zamindars. Now, in order to save their land, they had to borrow money from the money lender, and if the crops failed, they would lose their land to the money lenders or the zamindars. So this was a very pathetic situation of the farmers who had lost their lands just because they could not pay the revenue, or they could not return the money borrowed for cultivation. Second thing is that though the zamindars were asked to improve the agricultural conditions, but zamindars took no interest in improving the agricultural condition of the farmers. They were only interested in collection of revenue. This is because the company officials, they would occasionally visit the land and they would demand the revenue. if a zamindar paid to give the revenue which was to be collected by him, then this zamindar's post will be taken away and given to some other person. So in order to hold their post, zamindars did not pay any attention towards the cultivation of land or towards the improvement of agricultural practices. They just were interested in collection of revenue. Third, even though in certain areas when the zamindars were collecting much revenue from the peasants, they were paying only fixed rent to the company officials. So company officials felt that zamindars are getting benefited but company is incurring a lot of loss. So this is why the permanent system of collection of land revenue, which was introduced by Lord Cornwallis, was taken away or was stopped. The second kind of collection of land revenue was developed and brought into practice in the year 1822 by Holt Mackenzie, and he had brought the system of collection which was known as the Mahalwari system of land revenue collection. In the northwestern part of Bengal, different kind of land revenue collection was practiced. It was introduced by Holt Mackenzie in 1822. He had taken the lowest unit of our society, that is a village, as his main area of concern. He believed that villages form the basic unit of a society and it had to be preserved. So the villages in his time were called as mahals. So the revenue collection of each mahal depended upon the kind of land and cultivation which was practiced. For this, collectors were sent to each village and they were asked to measure up the land, record the kind of cultivation which can be practiced, and estimate the kind of revenue which can be collected from a piece of land. For example, if a particular land A has a worth of rupees 100, then that 100 rupee will be added with the other pieces of land, that is B, C and D, and then these lands revenue will be added and it will be calculated and taken as the revenue of the village. It will be revised periodically. That is, if the cultivation is high or production is good, higher rent will be paid, and if the production or cultivation is very low, the rent to be paid will also be low. Now this system, though it was a little good, but it also had certain problems. Now here the collection of revenue was given to the headman, senior person of the village. The headman, village headman, was responsible for collecting the land revenue from all the land, and he was to give it to the British officials. But this kind of land revenue system also had problem, because even if the cultivation is good or the cultivation was low, the kind of revenue demanded by the British officers was really very high, which is why people started leaving those cultivating areas and moved to nearby towns and cities. And this time, in the southern part of our country, a totally different kind of revenue collection system was followed. Actually, it was introduced by Captain Reed after he had acquired the land of Tipu Sultan. After defeating Tipu Sultan, a kind of land revenue collection was practiced in a small area, but it was expanded in the southern by Thomas Munro, who was the Governor General of Madras Presidency. So according to it also, the officials were to measure the land and revenue was paid by the Rayats. So that's why it is called as the Rayatwari system. Here the Rayats were the actual farmers who cultivated the land. So there was no job of the zamindars or the village headmen in this particular system of land revenue collection. It was the farmers who would be cultivating the land. Those farmers will be directly responsible of paying rent to the British officials. They did not have to go to the village headmen or to the zamindars to pay rent for cultivation. But this system also failed because, again, the amount of taxes demanded by the British officials were nearly very high, which is why peasants started leaving their cultivating land and moved to find better areas of employment. With this, I conclude today's class. This was the part 1 explanation of the lesson Ruling the Countryside. There is another part which will be the concluding part of this lesson.